Imagine it's the end of the month. You're sitting at your kitchen table, staring at your bank statement. You've worked 40 hours this week, maybe 50. You've skipped the expensive coffee, you've pushed the thermostat down 2 degrees to save on heating, and you've opted for the store-brand groceries. Yet somehow, your balance is lower than it was last year. Your rent is up. Your electricity bill looks like a mortgage payment. And when you fill up your car, you feel a physical sting in your wallet. Then you turn on the news. You see a headline flash across the screen. Another $60 billion aid package approved for Ukraine. You see images of tanks, missiles, and pallets of cash being shipped across the ocean. And a question starts to itch at the back of your mind. A question that politicians usually answer with slogans about democracy and freedom. But you aren't looking for slogans, you're looking for the math. You want to know who is actually paying for this. Is it the government? Is it the billionaires? Or is it you, the taxpayer in Ohio, the factory worker in Bavaria, the small business owner in Lyon? You've been told that this aid is a gift or an investment in security. But in the world of economics, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Every bullet fired in the Donbass, every generator sent to Kiev, and every salary paid to a Ukrainian civil servant has a source. In this 30-minute deep dive, we are going to follow the money. We are going to shatter the illusion of government spending and reveal the hidden transmission belts of inflation, debt, and the military-industrial complex. We are going to look at the inflation tax that is eating your savings, the debt bomb that your children will have to defuse, and the massive corporate loop that sends your tax dollars straight back into the pockets of defense contractors. Welcome to the reality of the most expensive conflict of the 21st century. Here is the untold story of the bill for Ukraine, and why you are likely paying more than you think. To understand who is paying, we have to start with the largest contributor, the United States. Since February 2022, the U.S. Congress has approved hundreds of billions of dollars in aid. But there's a huge misconception about what this money actually is. Most people imagine a giant transport plane filled with $100 bills flying to Kiev. While some direct financial support exists, the vast majority of military aid never actually leaves the United States. Imagine you are a taxpayer in the U.S. The government announces a $1 billion package for Javelin missiles. Does that money go to Ukraine? No. That money goes to a factory in Alabama or Arizona. The U.S. military takes old missiles from its own stockpiles and sends them to Ukraine. Then it uses your tax dollars to pay a defense contractor to build new, more expensive missiles to replace the old ones. This is effectively a massive, mandatory recycling program for your wealth. You are paying for the modernization of the U.S. military under the guise of foreign aid. While this creates jobs in certain states, it also prevents that money from being spent on your roads, your schools, or your health care. In the hinterland of the U.S., where bridges are crumbling and medical deserts are expanding, the sight of a $100 billion package can feel like a betrayal. Every dollar spent on a Patriot missile system is a dollar that isn't fixing a pothole in Ohio or lowering the cost of insulin in Florida. You are paying for global security, but you are paying for it with the domestic decay of your own community. The bill is hidden in the opportunity cost, the things you could have had, but never will.
If the U.S. is paying in opportunity costs, Europe is paying in daily survival. For the European Union, the cost of the war in Ukraine is not just a budget line, it is a fundamental restructuring of the economy that is making the average citizen poorer every day. For 30 years, the European industrial engine, especially Germany's, was built on a single, simple foundation: cheap Russian gas. This was the blood of the European economy. When the war started and the pipelines were cut, that blood stopped flowing. Imagine you are a homeowner in Germany or Poland. Suddenly, your heating bill has tripled. You aren't just paying for the gas you use, you are paying a geopolitical premium. Europe had to switch to expensive American liquefied natural gas, LNG, almost overnight. It isn't just a temporary spike, it is a permanent increase in the cost of living. But it's worse than just your home bill. High energy costs are killing European factories. Why would a chemical company stay in Ludwigshafen when energy is 5 times cheaper in the US or China? As these factories close, jobs vanish. The European taxpayer is paying for Ukraine through the de-industrialization of Europe. You are paying through the loss of high-paying manufacturing jobs. You are paying through the inflation of everything, because when energy prices go up, the price of the bread in the bakery and the shoes in the store follow. Europe is choosing to become a poorer continent to ensure a sovereign Ukraine. It might be a moral choice, but it is an incredibly expensive one that is being deducted from your quality of life every single month.
If you look at your tax return, you can see exactly how much the government took from you. But there is another tax, a secret, invisible tax that is paying for a huge portion of the Ukrainian aid. Economists call it inflation. Politicians call it Putin's price hike. But the reality is much more clinical and much more devastating for the middle class. Imagine the government wants to buy $10 billion worth of artillery shells. They don't have $10 billion sitting in a vault. They have two choices: raise your taxes, which is politically suicidal, or borrow the money. When the government borrows at this scale, the central bank, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the ECB, often steps in to liquidity the debt. They effectively create money out of thin air to buy government bonds. This is the hidden printing press. When you flood the economy with billions of new dollars or euros, the value of every existing dollar or euro in your pocket decreases. You aren't losing money in numbers, you are losing purchasing power. Think about it this way. You worked an hour today to earn, let's say, $25. Last year, that $25 bought you a full bag of groceries. Today, it buys you half a bag. That missing half bag of groceries is the inflation tax. That is how you are paying for the war. You are giving up an extra 30 minutes of your life every day to the state, not through a tax bill, but through the rising cost of eggs, milk, and rent. War is a massive consumer of resources. It takes steel, fuel, chemicals, and labor, and turns them into smoke and debris. In a normal economy, those resources would go into building cars, houses, or infrastructure. When they go to the front line, they vanish from the consumer market. Less supply plus more printed money equals the massive inflation spike you've been feeling since 2022. You are paying for the defense of Kyiv every time you look at a grocery receipt and feel that pit of dread in your stomach. It is a silent, regressive tax that hits the poorest the hardest, and it is the primary engine funding this conflict.
If inflation is the tax on your present, debt is the tax on your children's future. We are currently witnessing a geopolitical credit card being maxed out to levels that are historically unprecedented for a non-World War era. The aid packages for Ukraine are added to the national debts of the Western world. For a decade, this didn't seem to matter because interest rates were at zero. Debt was free, but the era of free money is over. As central banks raise rates to fight the very inflation caused by the war spending, the cost of servicing that debt has exploded. Imagine you were a taxpayer in the UK or the US. Your government is now spending more on interest payments than on its own military or education budget. You are paying billions of dollars every month to bondholders and foreign banks just to carry the debt of past aid packages. This is a death spiral. To pay the interest on the old debt, the government has to borrow more, creating new debt. Who pays the final bill? Your children. Every billion sent to Ukraine today is a bridge that won't be built in 2040. It is a pension that will be cut in 2050. It is a tax hike that will be imposed on a generation that isn't even born yet. We are effectively consuming the future to pay for a conflict in the present. In the U.S., the national debt is crossing $35 trillion. In Europe, the Stability and Growth Pact has been tossed into the trash. We are witnessing the bankruptcy of the Western middle class in real time, hidden behind the high-minded rhetoric of strategic necessity. You are paying through the slow decay of your civilization. You see it in the shuttered libraries, the potholes that never get fixed, and the social services that are temporarily suspended. The debt bomb is ticking in every government building in the West, and the Ukrainian aid is the fuse that keeps getting shorter.
Let's talk about the great circle of wealth. You've been told that the money is going to save Ukraine. But if you follow the bank transfers, you'll find that a massive portion of that money never leaves a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C., London, or Paris. When Congress approves $60 billion, it doesn't go to a Ukrainian bank. It goes to Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and General Dynamics. These companies are seeing their order books filled for the next decade. Their stock prices have outperformed almost every other sector since 2022. You, the taxpayer, are effectively being used as a middleman in a massive wealth transfer. The government takes your money, gives it to a defense contractor, and that contractor uses it to build weapons that are then shipped off. But the profit stays with the shareholders. It stays in the lobbying machine. You are paying for the dividends of the military-industrial complex. And the loop doesn't end when the guns stop firing. Already, the world's largest investment firms, companies like BlackRock and J.P. Morgan, are signing agreements for the Reconstruction of Ukraine. The estimated cost, over $1 trillion. Where will that $1 trillion come from? From more global aid packages. Your taxes will be used to pay these massive corporations to rebuild the very infrastructure that was destroyed. It is a double dip for the global elite. You pay for the missiles to destroy it, and then you pay for the contracts to rebuild it. Ukraine is being turned into a managed project, a playground for global capital, where the risk is socialized, you pay for it, and the profit is privatized. They keep it. This is the corporate loop, and you are the only one who doesn't get a seat at the table.
While the tanks and the missiles get all the headlines, there is a much quieter and more expensive transfer happening every single day. We're talking about the direct budgetary support. Most people don't realize that the West isn't just arming Ukraine, it is literally running the country. Imagine you're a taxpayer in a mid-sized town in Europe or the U.S. When you pay your taxes, you expect that money to go to your local police, your teachers, and your elderly. But since 2022, billions of those dollars have been wired directly to Kyiv to pay the salaries of Ukrainian firefighters, the pensions of Ukrainian grandmothers, and the wages of Ukrainian bureaucrats. For the first time in history, the Western middle class is subsidizing the entire social fabric of another nation during a total war. This is a geopolitical mortgage that has no end date. Ukraine's economy has shrunk by over 30%. They have no tax base left to fund a modern state. Without your monthly contribution, the Ukrainian state would collapse in 48 hours, not from a Russian missile, but from an empty treasury. But here's the question that makes politicians nervous. How much of that money is actually reaching the front? Ukraine has a long, documented history of systemic corruption. It was the Wild West of Europe for 30 years, dominated by powerful oligarchs and a labyrinthine bureaucracy. While the Zelensky administration has made high-profile arrests, the leakage is a mathematical reality of moving billions into a war zone. You are paying for the war risk premium, a polite term for the money that vanishes into the pockets of middlemen, corrupt procurement officers, and shadowy logistics firms. You are paying for a black box economy where the oversight is thin and the temptation is infinite. When you hear about a billion-dollar aid package, you have to ask yourself, how much of that is buying a shell for a cannon, and how much of it is buying a villa in Dubai for a person who knows how to move a decimal point? You are the financier of a system that is struggling to clean itself while being drowned in cash.
If you think you are paying a high price in the West, you need to look at the hidden victims in the global South. For the citizens of Egypt, Lebanon, Nigeria, and Indonesia, the bill for Ukraine is not paid in taxes, it is paid in calories. Ukraine and Russia together produced nearly 30% of the world's wheat exports and 80% of its sunflower oil. When the war started, the breadbasket of the world was set on fire. The Black Sea was turned into a blockade zone. Imagine you're a father in Cairo. You earn a modest wage that used to be enough to feed your family. Suddenly, the price of bread, the absolute staple of life, has doubled. You aren't paying for a missile, you are paying the geopolitical hunger tax. Because the West and Russia are fighting over the soil of Ukraine, the price of global grain has been weaponized. When people can't afford bread, they revolt. We saw it in the Arab Spring, and we are seeing the tremors of it again today. The West is paying for Ukraine twice, once through direct aid and a second time through the cost of managing the chaos in the global South. The instability caused by high food and fertilizer prices is driving a new wave of migration toward Europe and the U.S. You are paying for the war through the border crisis, through the increased cost of international security, and through the loss of influence in countries that now see the West as prioritizing a European war over a global famine. The bill for Ukraine is being settled in the empty stomachs of children thousands of miles away from the front line. It is a moral and economic debt that the West is accumulating, and the interest is paid in human suffering and global instability.
The most expensive thing being lost in this war isn't money. It isn't even energy. It is social trust. The fundamental contract between the citizen and the state is undergoing a psychological decay that might be permanent. Imagine you are a voter in a democracy. You've been told for years that there is no money for your health care, no money to fix your crumbling schools, and no money to secure your own borders. Then, almost overnight, the state finds $200 billion for a conflict 4,000 miles away. This creates a betrayal narrative. It fuels the rise of populist movements that argue the elite cares more about a foreign flag than its own people. You are paying for Ukraine through the polarization of your society. You see it in the protests, the toxic social media debates, and the collapse of the center in politics. The war has become a lens through which everyone views their own local grievances. And then there is the propaganda. To keep the blank check flowing, the narrative must be kept in a state of high-intensity emotional manipulation. You are being bombarded with information warfare from both sides. This kills the ability of a society to have a rational conversation about its own interests. The cost of Ukraine is the death of the middle ground. When you can't agree on the facts of where your money is going, you can't agree on anything. This psychological toll is making our democracies slower, angrier, and less capable of solving their own problems. You are paying with the civil cohesion of your nation. The bill is a society that is increasingly fractured, paranoid, and cynical. A society that feels like it's being sold out by a leadership that is obsessed with a geopolitical chess match, while the players at home are losing their homes. So, who is actually paying for Ukraine? The answer is, you are. But not just through your taxes. You are paying through the inflation that eats your wages. You are paying through the debt that mortgages your children's future. You are paying through the de-industrialization that kills your jobs and the social decay that poisons your communities. We are witnessing a global financial cataclysm in slow motion. The war in Ukraine is the most expensive project of the 21st century, and it is being funded by the systematic hollow out of the Western middle class. But there is a limit. A blank check eventually bounces. We are approaching the fatigue point, where the mathematical reality of debt and inflation will collide with the political reality of voter rage. The warning flare is already in the sky. If the West doesn't find a way to balance its strategic ambition with its economic reality, the collapse won't happen in Kyiv. It will happen in London, in Paris, and in Washington, D.C. The reality of the Ukraine aid is that it is a one-way street. The money is gone. The resources are smoke. The future is leveraged. As you look at your bank statement tonight, remember, you aren't just a citizen of a country. You are the involuntary financier of a new world order that is being built on your back. The chocolate is still good. The luxury stores in Paris still shine. But the balance sheet is a disaster. Is the price of freedom too high, or is the price of failure even higher? That is the question of our age. But one thing is certain, you are the one paying the bill. If this analysis shattered your illusion of free aid, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, how has the inflation tax affected your life since 2022? We want to hear the real stories from the ground. Subscribe for more deep dives into the dark side of the global economy. If you want to see who might be the next to hit the wall, watch our video on the death of the German engine. See you in the next one.